I know a lot of people say they love Spider-Man, actors, directors, movie fans, whatever, but I don't think there's a fictional character more impactful on me than Peter Parker. I grew up watching the 90s animated show, I remember my dad bringing me to see the Raimi movie, I remember action figures, trading cards, and I still believe the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon has yet to be outdone in terms of televised superhero narratives. Hell, the first comic I owned was The Amazing Spider-Man. What I'm trying to say is, I love Spider-Man, so much so that I'm really glad he doesn't exist, because I can't afford to be on another government watch list.
I wasn't building a bomb! I was just curious.
So you can imagine my excitement when Insomniac Games, a company I already love for the Ratchet & Clank series, announced they were working on a Spider-Man video game. I pre-ordered not only the game but the collector's edition. I took the week off work so I could pick it up and play it the day it came out, and I probably finished the whole game in the space of a week, if not 3 days. But was it worth having to miss the birth of my nephew just to play a game based on a guy who beats up people in red and blue PJs? Yeah, it was. Before we go any further, I want you to know Spider-Man is not a perfect game. Not even close. It shoehorns in terrible puzzles, it forces you to play as characters that are clearly not Spider-Man, therefore not nearly as good, and it's very clearly taking a lot of cues from the Arkham series. But a video game doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, or even the greatest to be your favorite game of all time, and Spider-Man PS4 may be one of my favorite games of all time. But allow me to be self-indulgent, you know, unlike my other videos, which are 100% fact with no mistakes and are all universally accepted and loved.
That doesn't sound right, but I don't know enough about stars to dispute it.
No, it's right.
Anyone with a passing knowledge of Spider-Man will know the famous Uncle Ben line.
Ah, Peter, you dumbass, stop that thief or he'll kill me. Oh no, I've been shot, I'm dying, it's all your fault. Maybe you should stop other thieves so no other uncles get shot, you dickhead. Oh, now I'm dead.
Now the best thing about the Raimi movies is that they streamline this admittedly wordy quote.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
I mentioned this as responsibility is the crux of Spider-Man's character and is at the center of the best Spider-Man stories. But what does this have to do with Insomniac, man? Responsibility is basically the tagline, be greater. Insomniac Games takes this statement to heart, in my opinion, makes one of the greatest Spider-Man stories ever by creating a narrative which challenges the web-slinger's idea of responsibility and how he can not just be a better hero, but a better man in general. One thing I've always struggled with in the Spidey flicks is that Peter's brains and personal relationships are seriously lacking. In the Raimi movies, Peter only really makes the suit, and he doesn't have any friends that he's not trying to smash in every sense of the word. Now Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland make better strides in fixing this, but only use Peter's technical skills as a footnote or like a little joke rather than a character trait. Spider-Man the game immediately fixes this, and I mean like in the first scene. We see family photos, a dozen technical books, designs for the web shooters, tools to tinker with, loose components, a computer running code, and the iconic costume is lined with circuitry and a heads-up display. I mean, for God's sakes, he's even modified his own toaster. This isn't superfluous detail, it's character building. This Peter is an inventor and a tinkerer. Get it? Like the Spider-Man villain. All of this is in place to set up the story at large and ask the major question of the game. Who can help more people, Spider-Man or Peter Parker? Now, in any movie, it's obviously Spider-Man. Peter is just a guy, but it's because of Peter's intelligence and his mind that the answer becomes less clear-cut here. Peter has a job as a lab assistant constructing Winter Soldier arms, but less cool. While the web slinger can pull people from burning buildings, Peter in this scenario has the chance to help enact positive change the world over. It's Spider-Man that's hindering his progress in that regard, and much like Spider-Man 2, even hindering his personal life. The key difference is this is a Peter that is fully ensconced in responsibility. He's not looking to quit doing all a Spider can, but knows that he can potentially do more good elsewhere. One thing that I've noticed is that people see certain defining character traits in superheroes as negatives, and they're not entirely wrong, but the answer isn't to completely remove these traits. Yes, Batman doesn't kill, and against villains like the Joker, he totally should, but not killing is a core aspect of Batman. Without the no-killing rule, Batman's story's greatest struggles would be how long it takes him to catch the Joker and then BAM! Neck snap. not nearly as interesting as leveraging this trait in a Batman story to kind of reflect how flawed that thinking is. I mentioned this because Spider-Man's responsibility is an exploitable weakness from a narrative sense. We see all too often Peter takes responsibility that isn't his to take or blames himself for things outside his control. This is something the game wholeheartedly explores. Peter's inability to let others accept the responsibility of protecting New York kinda blows up in his face. The narrative presents him with versions of what he wants to be by initially challenging Peter's idea of his role in the world and the nature of responsibility. It does this through Martin Lee, Dr. Octavius, and a third character that we'll get into later. Both men represent a reflection of Peter. Martin Lee runs a homeless shelter. He may be a philanthropist and overall big-hearted billionaire, but he too, like Peter, was orphaned young and has a drive to help the people of New York. You could even make the leap that he's the reason Peter considers helping others with his non-Spidey talents. Except he's also Mr. Negative.
Great name, bro. Very original.
The first major bad guy of the game on a warpath against Norman Osborn, who turned him into a monochrome monstrosity. Lee is the version of Spider-Man who never resolved his issues with Uncle Ben's murderer. He's a rampaging force of revenge that doesn't care about anything or anyone as long as he can get his vengeance. The flip side is Peter knows how hollow revenge is and that Lee is throwing away a chance to do real good, completely undoing all the positive work he's given the world. That's why even though Lee's powers make people act on their darker desires, it has no real effect on Spidey. His anger and his greed no longer interest him because he knows how bad it can be to give into these emotions. Dr. Octavius, on the other hand, is the Peter that never got bitten by the spider, and he's an even better parallel to Pete as a character. He's got a similar jokey demeanor, he has an air of self-sacrifice for his work, and heck, they even wear similar colours. Both these characters contest Spidey's ideas of which side he should commit himself to. Mr. Negative shows that New York needs more immediate attention, what with it being constantly plagued by terrors like Shocker, Tombstone, and worst of all, YouTube prank videos.
Bro, it's a prank, bro.
Dr. Octavius, on the other hand, shows Peter what he can accomplish with his mind, that Peter can become an accomplished man through his ingenuity. However, one thing both Otto and Martin lack is Peter's moral code. Neither man has an issue with descending into villainy to accomplish their own greedy, self-serving goals, throwing into question their intentions from the very beginning. While Martin Lee may be a philanthropist, he organized a terrorist cell and sought to unleash a deadly virus on New York. Not exactly the actions of a good man, and one could argue all of his good works were a front to throw suspicion off the fact that Martin Lee is Mr. Negative. While Otto is making advanced prosthetics that will help countless people, he's only doing it because he has motor neuron disease, and eventually he'll be trapped in his own body. And the first chance he has to cut corners and fast track it all against Peter's concerns, it turns him into Doc Ock, a villain so meticulous he not only one-ups Mr. Negative by recruiting him into his boy band as backup vocals, but also releases the virus Lee tried to use. Lee and Octavius are Peter and Spidey's opposites. While Peter may do bad things like lie, push people away, and break the law as a vigilante, he's doing it for the right reasons. Conversely, Mr. Negative and Doc Ock do the right things for the wrong reasons. Otto is even worse, as we see in the climax of the game, he had no issue almost killing Peter to get what he wanted. That's why Peter is so angry at the end of the game, and why Otto, trying to appeal to Peter's kindness, and even threatening to tell everyone he's Spider-Man, falls on deaf ears. Peter knows now Otto isn't the man he worshipped, he's just another villain. He's a user through and through, and yet Peter still offers help in some capacity, showing that he learnt a lesson from Octavius but can condemn Dr. Octopus. But what is it that they're missing that keeps Peter so honest? The one person who puts the man in Spider-Man, and honestly the most impactful figure to him overall, and hottie with a body. I'm sure a lot of you expected me to say Uncle Ben. I mean, we already established him giving Spider-Man his mantra and the unshakable need to atone for losing his surrogate parent. However, really and truly, it's May Parker that exerts the most influence in the story. Pretty much all Spider-Man media does Aunt May dirty when you remember Ben Parker didn't raise Peter alone. They both instilled in Peter the qualities that make him Spider-Man. In this game, May is especially impactful. She's a volunteer at the Feast Center, arguably more involved in its running than Martin Lee, and there's one line that really stands out where Peter talks to May that just screams Spider-Man.
Sacrificing so much and asking for nothing.
But it's that mantra of helping one person help them all that reiterates that Spider-Man is a man of the people. Yeah, he'll stop a runaway train, but he's not above helping a kid that's just down on his luck, or even just lending a hand around Feast, just cause that's the type of man he is.
No. Just a little below their pay grade.
Not so much for Spidey, Tony, and that's because of Aunt May. Even when Martin Lee is branded as a terrorist, she still looks at Feast as a place for good. Not for her own benefit or glory, but because it's what she wants to do. Even her relationship with Peter, there's no pushing or prodding. She's not intrusive, but she has unconditional love for Peter. There's no finger wagging when Peter gets evicted, just a kind gesture and a few words to ask for help when he needs it.
Maybe you should have taken May's advice and asked for help.
I think it's also telling that May is not only the oldest of Peter's mentors, but also the least powerful. She doesn't have any powers like Lee or Spidey, and she doesn't have a scientific mind like Peter or Ock. But with what little power she does have, she tries to help New York in whatever way she can. When she has the power to decide whether thousands die or she gets to live, what does she do? She lets Spider-Man, her nephew, who she allowed to be Spidey for years, decide. No guilt, no hesitation, just a kind word and reassurance that he's doing the right thing. May Parker, in her dying breath, reassures Peter of all of his decisions, lets him know that even though it may hurt, he's right not to save her, and prompts him to let others help. May Parker is greater, and because of this, so is Spider-Man.
Sometimes, to do what's right, we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most.
You know who said that? Marissa Tomei, I mean Aunt May. May Parker doesn't save the day by being stronger than someone or being the smartest person in the room, but leaves the world a better place with a better Spider-Man to watch over it. I'm honestly hard pressed to find another game with a more fully realized and emotionally gripping narrative, especially a superhero game. Yeah, Batman is cool, but it's not really saying anything. Yeah, Infamous is flashy, but it doesn't move me. Yeah, The Avengers is a pile of garbage.
You don't want to say anything nice about the Avengers game?
Nope. But this moment, right here, is more heart-wrenching and upsetting than any of these, cause it earns it. If Uncle Ben was the spark for Spider-Man, May Parker's kindness and empathy fanned the flame. Yeah, Spider-Man isn't perfect, and neither is his game. But I think if you can learn something from art, if it can teach you, then that's the mark of a masterpiece. And for me, that's Spider-Man as a character. That's his stories at their best, when we focused on the man, not the spider. And I think that's Peter's greatest power. It isn't the web swinging or the wall sticking, but his kindness. I don't know, guys. Maybe as someone who's lost a parent recently, I'm reading too much into all this, but I really do believe Spider-Man is something else. But what do you guys think? Am I off the mark here, and are there any other games that moved you guys or you think are the creme de la creme? Let me know in the comments, and give this video a like if you liked it, a dislike if you didn't, and maybe give me a sub if you want to see more. Share it with your friends or your enemies. I don't mind too much, but be excellent to one another.
Winning? Is that what you think it's about? I'm not trying to win. I'm not doing this because I want to beat someone, because I hate someone, or because I want to blame someone. It's not because it's fun. God knows it's not because it's easy. It's not even because it works, because it hardly ever does. I do what I do because it's right, because it's decent, and above all, it's kind. It's just that. Just kind.